I just want to quickly apologize for this giant thing taking up a third of the frame. Sometime between January and when I recorded that unboxing video a couple weeks ago, my lav mic decided to stop working, so this is the iPhone XR. On the back, it's got a 12 megapixel optically stabilized f1.8 sensor, and Apple thinks so highly of it that it calls it a new era of photography. And it's pretty good. The pictures it takes are pretty good. They're certainly a step up from the point-and-shoot cameras that I grew up using. And if I'm in a situation where I'd like to get a couple shots for either social media or even to get a print of, I'm willing to trust my phone more and more to get those interesting shots and angles. And as smartphone cameras keep getting better and better, there's one very important question that needs to be asked. Do standalone camera gadgets still make sense? And in this video, I'm going to explain why the DJI Osmo Pocket and the Snapchat Spectacles prove that, yeah, they do. First, a quick overview, but I'll keep these short since they've both been on the market for a little while now. So the particular spectacles that I have are Snap's second attempt at making an essentially GoPro-like experience that fits better in people's daily carry. But the thing is, they haven't really been selling too well, and some early reports suggested that after about a month, people just pretty much stopped using them, and to be honest, that's how I found it. The thing is, I don't go on adventures that often, and the day-to-day life of a college student really isn't that exciting. However, this is still a very solid piece of gear, especially considering that it's essentially Snapchat's second ever attempt at making hardware. Hardware is hard, and I think Snap has put some real thought into how they've made these. While the design doesn't exactly hide the fact that you're a gadget nerd, it doesn't go around screaming it either. And while Snap has chose to go for a proprietary charging connector, it's magnetic. Plus, the same cable charges both the case and the glasses themselves. And from a camera perspective, the super wide-angle lens paired with an HD sensor offers a unique enough perspective that I'm actually willing to overlook the spectacles' admittedly B+ color and crispiness. And while I haven't exactly used these to capture any of the wild adventures that Snap is advertising on its site, I have found them to be a pretty good travel companion. Most of all, these really just let me keep my hands free and experience a moment or a location without worrying about having to fumble around with my phone and get everything framed and get a good shot. I once wrote that one of my favorite parts about photography was to be able to share my essentially literal perspective with others, and these are probably the best realization of that idea that I've seen so far. This actually ended up being my primary camera when I went to the Pacific Northwest last summer, and I still really like how the photos and videos it was able to capture lent that much more to conveying a sense of place, not only when I view it back, but when I go and share it with others. So in that sense, I still think that this is a pretty cool tool to be able to keep around with you. Alright, let's move on to the Osmo Pocket. Like the spectacles, this puts a camera in a form factor that essentially we haven't seen too much of in the past. You get a 12 megapixel camera that's capable of 4K at up to 60 frames a second or 1080 at up to 120. And you also get a smattering of other modes like still images, panoramas, time lapses, and the much more cooler motion lapse, which I'll talk about in a few. And like other members of the Osmo line, this is paired with a 3-axis mechanical gimbal, so you get corrections for things like tilt, roll, and pan. For the size, this is actually a really solid sensor. 4K videos come out crisp, and there's even a D-Cinelite color profile that lets you get a little more creative with your color grading if you want. And if you'd like to use it for stills, it does a pretty good job with those as well. It's not brilliant in low light, however, and sometimes it struggles to focus on things that are right in front of it, but those are trade-offs that are expected with something this small. Now, that size ended up being more of a double-edged sword than anything. On one hand, having mechanical stabilization on something that you can just pull out of your pocket at a moment's notice is pretty unprecedented, and to have 4K and 60 frames a second on top of that is even nicer. See, carrying around a full camera setup does become a bit of a hassle, and the Osmo Pocket just makes the decision of, do I want to capture this moment, that much easier. Also, this might just be a me thing, but I prefer having a button to turn my camera on instead of using a bunch of swipes to get to it, like on my phone, especially in more spur-of-the-moment situations. Now, the flip side to this really convenient form factor is there are going to be a couple of limitations based on how gimbals work. Now, don't get me wrong. Having the gimbal is still far better than not having a gimbal, and you can get some really cool shots that you pretty much wouldn't be able to with anything else that fits in your pocket. But if you look at more professional gimbals, or even the Osmo's cousin, the Osmo Mobile, you'll see that the Pocket has a pretty small range of motion. And the easiest way that you can see that is when you're doing the typical gimbal walking along shots. You're gonna be able to notice that little bob with each step you take. It's better than if you didn't have something like a gimbal to stabilize your steps, but it's gonna be noticeable. For my time using it, it's also meant that you have to be a lot more deliberate with how you use the Osmo Pocket. Having it won't magically make your shots and videos all cinematic and cool looking. It's gonna take some practice and a lot of trial and error. A lot of my shots that I got at first, where I was just kind of absent-mindedly shooting things, came out with a bit of a hovering effect that you kind of get with gimbals, and while it's not entirely a deal breaker, I think sometimes it can actually be as distracting as having a shaky camera. It's not that you can't use this everywhere, because of course that would defeat the purpose of having this form factor, but it's just that you have to exercise a little bit more thought in how you're capturing your moments. But when it does go well, it makes a pretty good case for why the vast majority of software-based image stabilization can't beat out 3 good old-fashioned motors physically canceling out any wobbles or shakes that you might have. And the use of those physical motors also gives you some pretty cool camera modes that you can't get no matter how good software image stabilization is. Automatic 9x9 panoramas are pretty cool, but what really takes the cake are the moving time lapses, or as DJI calls them, motion lapses. It's a bit tricky at first to kind of work out how many shots you're taking versus how long you're taking the video for, but when it does work out, it's a pretty cool effect for surprisingly little work on your side. Okay, so why am I putting these two in the same video? I mean, they are different in pretty much every way imaginable. One is a pair of sunglasses that lets others live vicariously through a social media post, and the other is a shrunk-down cinematic tool that lets you make everyday life that much more of an occasion. Well, you'll notice that I haven't really touched on price this video, and that's because it's going to be less of a should you buy this type of video and more of a here's why you can if you choose, especially considering that these aren't the cheapest toys. Here's what I mean. So the phrase, the best camera is the one that you have with you, is something that's coming up more and more, especially in 2019, and it's for good reason too. Like I said at the top of this video, my phone camera is decent enough that I don't exactly just forego my desire to get a quality photo or video if I don't have my big camera with me. But the fact that our phones manage so many different aspects of our lives in addition to just taking photos and videos is why I think that camera gadgets like the Osmo Pocket and the Spectacles deserve a look at. I don't want to say it's become a case of smartphones being a jack of all trades and a master of none, but I think that those cameras are built to be as good of a camera as they can be in as many situations as possible. And on the other hand, what standalone camera gadgets offer is the extra degree of specialization and that wow factor. See, when you're not worried about having your camera bits compete with other internal hardware components or having your software play nice with other things like phone or email or navigation, then you can have those extra capabilities and features that take your content to the next level. When your sole purpose is to get good quality photo and video and then incorporate that extra wow factor, every single aspect of your device, from hardware ergonomics to the way that your software works, can be laser focused on getting you those shots as quickly and as cleanly as possible. And at the end of the day, it's not like you're carrying that much more. These fit in my pocket and these fit on my head. So if you have the means, there's simply not much trade-off anymore to carrying an entirely separate device that can do things that your phone probably can't and never will. Thanks for watching.